Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Nass the Pod, Season 3, NBA Finals preview. I know you guys have been waiting very patiently for the playoffs to wrap up, and now we're at the biggest stage of the whole season, the NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics, the Dallas Mavericks, both advanced. I can't wait. This series, before I kind of get into details and all that fun stuff, this has the potential to be the best NBA Finals I've ever watched. Definitely has some potential. When you think about the storylines, Kyrie and all the Boston stuff, Kristaps and his previous Dallas tenure, got that storyline. Obviously home team, Boston. And then, on the other side of it, everyone already knows like my fandom of Kyrie. And even though, and I'm not gonna get in too deep about Kyrie's like off the court stuff, but I feel like a lot of the off the court stuff kind of blinded people about, hey, this guy is still one of the greatest 3-level scorers and just one of the greatest point guards we've ever seen. I know like his in-season accolades don't really stack up. He doesn't have a bunch of All-NBAs or, a bunch of top 5 MVP finishes, but this is still, when you look with your own two eyes, one of the greatest guards to ever play the game. And that's why, for those of you that have been watching since last year or the year prior, when I did that Luka-Kyrie like Mavs video, title contender or title pretenders, like I already knew like those two were gonna be able to be cohesive like instantly. I already knew that. Obviously it was gonna take some time, but with some time together under their belt, I just knew that these two guys are way too talented to not make it work. If they weren't able to make it work, then that just would have been a travesty given their skill set, their talent, what they've done in this league. I just knew it was inevitable. Like these two were literally going to hit the ground running, just from an offense point of view. But it's just a bunch of storylines in this Boston-Dallas NBA final. I can't wait. This is gonna be a tough series for me personally. It's gonna sting a little bit, regardless who wins. But I mean, honestly, like all in all, like my biggest battle with this whole Kyrie thing is I just wanted to remind people that Kyrie is not only one of the greatest guards to ever play, but he is still a winning basketball player. And I hate how people just throw the label winning player, losing player, when the NBA is like, it's really based on situations, just like a lot of professional sports. Like having the right coach matters, having the right complementary pieces. I mean, this Mavericks team is a prime example of that. I mean, last year Luka and Kyrie, like you look at their numbers last year, they played well together. But they didn't have the luxury of having two bigs. They didn't have the luxury of all these, these athletic wings that can run the floor and play different positions and give them, different looks and versatility on both ends of the court. And now you blink. And on top of that, before I even continue, people act like, Kyrie signed with the Mavericks like before 2022 started. No, he was on the Nets. Nets reached the 2 seed. Had a meeting with Joe Tsai or whatever. They put some championship stipulations in his contract offer. Him and his representative felt insulted. He requested a trade. Word got back to KD. KD requested a trade, and ever since, people have just been speaking ill about Joe Tsai. The Brooklyn Nets have been irrelevant ever since both those superstars left. I don't have to like revisit this, but my main point is that like Kyrie didn't get a full, training camp with, Luka or Jason Kidd or the rest of the team. Like he got traded. They didn't make the playoffs. They tanked those last couple of games to prioritize a draft asset, which they ended up in Derek Lively, who's been, one of the most impactful rookies this season. I think we can say that to this point. I don't know if the Mavericks make it to this point without him. I'm not very sure. So you got that on the table. And, he's just been spending, I just feel like, basketball's very situational, and I just didn't want people to lose sight of the fact that, listen, Kyrie Irving is still like that. He's very much like that. And I feel like there's a lot of people around that should apologize. Stephen A. Smith, ironically, he apologized. I think he had some episode. I didn't watch it, but I saw it on Twitter. He had some, some video where he apologized to Kyrie. Personally, I didn't want to watch it because it's like, listen, man, you already told us where you stand. You already kind of exposed yourself. So, I mean, I get it. Like, people deserve second chances and whatnot. But sometimes when you say certain things and you stand on certain things, it's kind of hard to take back what you said and be like, oh, I'm sorry for saying this. Now, Kyrie was majority healthy. He didn't have any off-the-court distractions. The Mavs were a playoff team this year, like a competitive playoff team. It's not like they just snuck in, but the West had like 10, I think over 10 teams that were 10 games or more over 500. So the Mavs were literally in the thick of like one of the most historically like winningest, seasons for a conference, for the Western Conference. So that can't be understated. So there's just a lot of moving parts in this whole Kyrie Luka era, sort of say. So but enough of that. I'm gonna start off with some of my takeaways from the Eastern Conference Finals on the Celtics side, the Celtics Indiana Pacers. I know that series has already concluded, but certain things I'm gonna touch upon that I feel like may play an intricate part in the NBA Finals on the Mavericks side, Western Conference Finals. I'm going to look at a couple things where I feel like some things they could build on, some things that they might want to look at, potential exposure in certain areas, matchups, stuff like that. So I'm going to take some pros and cons from each series and basically kind of dive into how I feel like it'll translate to the NBA Finals. So with this series, I'll start off Jaylen Brown. Actually, before I start with the Eastern Conference Finals, Anthony Edwards, congratulations on a great season, my dog. If I have to pause an episode to, give you a congratulations on a great season, then that's how you know you were really hooping, because I usually don't even do things like that. But, for a 22-year-old, defeating the defending champs, being one of the best two-way players this postseason, just one of the best players in the postseason, period. Like, if you were to make an all-playoffs team, like, he's definitely first team for sure. Especially with his leadership, and he really showed me that he's ready to be a formidable like half court scorer. If you guys remember a couple episodes ago with Jason, I did tell him, and I guess I was sort of right, because my whole thing wasn't just that Edwards won't be able to hit certain jump shots or certain shots in the half court when the pace slows down, but my main worry was that who was going to be the shot creator to alleviate him of having to carry that burden for 40 minutes in a game. And you saw tonight, it's a lot on the table for a 22-year-old. You're asking him to chase around Kyrie. He's also helping on Luka, and then he's also a secondary defender on certain possessions where he might be on Derrick Jones Jr. or PJ, or if he's on a switch or whatnot. So that's just on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, you're really asking him to just create for himself, create for others, stress the floor, hit the three ball, get to the line, and just be a dynamic, like, offensive engine, shot creator, whatever you want to call it, like lead guy, lead alpha dog. Like, so I think in I don't want to say his first run, I'd say his second run at it, because we saw it in some flashes last year. I think he played, very well. So I just wanted to congratulate Anthony Edwards on an insane 22-year-old, season. I said earlier this season I wasn't really understanding why he didn't get a lot of MVP talks, especially for the way the Wolves performed on both sides of the floor all year, and he was very instrumental to what they were doing on both sides of the floor, and well as the fact that, usually 22-year-olds don't adapt, especially as the franchise guy, that quick. There's only a couple guys we've seen that kind of get into the league with, all the hype and the pressure, and then they live up to it, and then boom, they become this franchise superstar. It's really been only guys like Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, obviously, Larry Bird. Like, those are really like the guys that really came into the league, made a splash, and then they continued and they played themselves into basically like a Hall of Fame trajectory. So I don't really know what Ant's ceiling is. I know everyone's talking about the Michael Jordan comps. This is definitely one of the best 22-year-old seasons we've seen in recent memory, for sure, especially when you take into account that he defeated the Denver Nuggets. So just want to congratulate and salute Ant on a great season. The Celtics Eastern Conference final versus the Indiana Pacers. Indiana Pacers, as everyone knows, number one offense in the league. despite not really having any potent like 3-level like shot creators or scorers or scoring leaders, like their leading scorer and assist guy was Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton isn't this guy that is that's gonna dance on you in isolation or leap over you at the rim. He's a very effective offensive lead star guard. He is one of the best passers in the league, period. And it's not just the fact that he passes guys into high quality looks, but the Pacers, their ecosystem, their offense, like everyone is constantly moving around. And I felt like Boston actually did a fairly good job of actually like, keeping up with them. It was pretty understated. Everyone kind of like, just kind of brushed off Indiana like they weren't anything. I'm not going to lie. I did some brushing them off myself just because sometimes you just look at the first 4 or 5 guys on these teams and you're like, oh, this team can't compete with this guy. Like they got like 2, 3 All-Stars, a couple All-NBA guys, Coach of the Year candidate, a couple, All-Defender guys. Like they're not going to hang with that. But, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner, Nembhard. Shout out Nembhard. He's really the one that really raised my eyebrows because he was hitting some shots in the half court that I honestly didn't even know that he was capable of doing so. I knew he had some ability, but not when you're doing it on the playoff stage. That's just a different story. That's when you can really take a guy serious, especially the younger guys, because that Pacers team is fairly young. So, Jaylen Brown, Eastern Conference Finals MVP, very well deserved. That shot he hit in game 1 to tie the game with a couple seconds left in the game to force OT, that probably, I don't want to say it told the story for the rest of the series, but who knows how this series goes if maybe he doesn't hit that shot. He doesn't hit that shot, maybe the Pacers escape, maybe they get game 1, then maybe we get game 2, but it wasn't really me being worried about the loss. My main thing was like, the Celtics last year, we tend to just waste time with teams that are inferior. Last year in the first round, the Hawks took us 6 games. For those of you that remember that Trae Young shot that hit over Jaylen Brown, I think in game 5, took us 6 games. DeJounte Murray was actually suspended for a game, I believe, too. So I didn't want to see a repeat of that. The Celtics, like, we've been dominant all regular season this year, just like we were last year. I know this year was a little bit, different with all the advanced metrics and our starting lineup being like the best starting 5, an all-time starting 5, I should say. I get it, but that was really the thing I was trying to really observe, throughout this playoffs is how dominant is Boston going to be? Are we going to take care of business when we need to take care of? And there were some instances where it looked like we were going to fold, but I think that's what comes with the maturation process of a team that is, built around 2 wings that are entering the primes of their career, and they've been in 6 conference finals, and I don't need to, do the whole revisionist history of, their resumes and whatnot, but, like I said, Jaylen Brown, I believe he averaged like 29 points, like 6 rebounds, couple assists, being a high-level defender. Jaylen Brown right now, he's not afraid to defend anyone. I believe he asked to, like, on switches with Miles Turner in the pick and roll or just any switches in general, specifically with Miles Turner, like, I'm pretty sure, like, he wanted that. I'm pretty sure I heard that. I think it was either a quote or a soundbite or something. I'm pretty sure it was from him, but he basically mentioned how he was, like, trying to, like, guard Miles Turner. Those of you that know Jaylen Brown, very fearless. He's had a hell of a season defensively, and I keep saying it. Like, I understand Derek White, Drew Holiday, like, those are great defenders. Made all defensive team. We heard Derek White talk about how, Jaylen Brown probably should have been up there with them, and I'm not gonna lie, if you go look at the tape, there were a couple games where Jaylen Brown was really showcasing why he should be regarded as a very high elite 2-way guard. There was that game Golden State came to TD Garden. Jaylen Brown, if you want to say he shut Steph Curry down, he kind of did. I mean, Steph kind of had an off night. You can go check the tape and check the numbers. Steph did shoot well that game. There was a particular game against New Orleans on the road where Jaylen took on Zion Williamson, and this was something that I had never seen before from him. You know what I mean? We can already talk about, the discrepancy in body mass and weight when you compare Zion to Jaylen Brown, but he was very effective, and even that day, a game they won, he he played him very well, and Zion didn't have the best shooting night. It's something that I'm keeping an eye out on, especially in this NBA Finals going up against Luka and Kyrie. I know Jaylen is definitely going to have his fingerprints on both those guards, like for sure. Like he's definitely going to have some sort of defensive impact, probably just as much as Drew Holiday and Derek White, if not more. I mean, Jaylen probably has the slightly more ideal size, and he's just as twitchier. His foot speed is just as fast as those guys. But I'm keeping an eye out on that. Jason Tatum, I believe, the most underrated superstar in the league right now. He's made like 2-3 straight first team All NBAs. I'm looking, there's not really anything in particular I'm looking from him besides just dominating from the first minute to the last second on the buzzer. He can go on star stretches, and I know the way he kind of approaches certain games. The first quarter, for example, Jaylen Brown will be really aggressive. And it's been a theme that I've been noticing this year is that he'll take, a good chunk of shots in the first quarter. And Tatum will kind of be the guy that's, just playing chess. Obviously, he'll be aggressive. He might get a couple looks up, but he's really playing chess, kind of orchestrating the offense in a way, making sure guys are getting touches. Tatum's not a point guard. You know what I mean? And he's not regarded as a point forward, but he brings the ball up. He gets all sorts of different coverages as if he gets like the same coverages as like Kevin Durant at this point in his career. And I'm not saying he is a point guard or point forward, but he is literally like the most vital component to the entire offense because the defense does not scout for anyone more than him, and the defense doesn't cover anyone else like him. Maybe Jaylen Brown a little bit, but that's probably during like non-Tatum lineups because he's, obviously the sole like kind of star shot creator, during those minutes. But I've noticed that Tatum has, and like I said about the maturation process and experience building, it's what I've kind of observed watching Tatum this year is that it looks like he's picking his spots better. You know what I mean? It's not just Missoula staggering Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum minutes so they don't overlap or get in each other's way. It's truly and organically like a mental thing that I'm seeing from Tatum, that he's really trying to make sure that everyone kind of eats because he knows he can eat at any time. You know what I mean? This is a guy that, dropped 50 in a game 7 against, Giannis. So it's going to be very vital because obviously the Mavs defense that's been playing very, very well basically since I want to say the second half of the season till now, they've been playing just great defense. They've been one of the best defensive teams. I just know that he's going to get certain coverages, and I just want him to just continue to kind of play that chess game to start off, and then you guys already know how I feel about him and Jaylen Brown's shot selection and how I feel like they should approach the game from a scoring standpoint. Tatum, no, none of these boys can guard you. You know what I mean? That's the mentality he has to have. He probably already has it, but I just want to see it for 40 minutes. Every game this series, I want to see him trying to get to the cup. I want to see him trying to, seek the mismatch. Kyrie and Luka, like, they're not hanging with you, man. You know what I mean? Like, get them on the block, couple power dribbles, turnarounds, fades, step-throughs. I feel like that is the calling for Tatum. I don't think this is going to be a series where it's, 140 to 130 or 120 to 115. I think this is going to be a series where people are going to be kind of shocked at the level of defense both teams are playing. And obviously, we know Boston has been one of the best defensive teams all season. The Mavericks were a little middle of the road, but, obviously they acquired P.J. Washington and then, Derek Jones and then Gafford. They got an additional rim protector, so they've kind of hit the ground running. And then I have to give Luka and Kyrie credit, and I'm not going to talk about offense. You guys might expect me to, but Kyrie and Luka, they've been very, very, very high-level defenders this playoffs. If you go and look at their defensive field goal percentage allowed, it's amongst the league leaders, and it's been like that, I think, even since prior to the OKC round. Even the Clippers round, the first round of the series, they were playing really good defense. And this is a team in the Mavericks that has faced legit Western Conference teams that have given everyone, problems. In the OKC Thunder, the LA Clippers, both those teams were really, really good two-way teams, especially the Thunder. And then the Clippers, prior to Kawhi kind of falling off and Russell breaking his hand, they were one of the best two-way teams in basketball. They came into Boston. I was talking about it with a colleague of mine. I remember they came into Boston, and actually my colleague said that he was at that game, and he watched the Clippers come in there and smack Boston. So the way I'm seeing it is, I know the playoffs are a different story, but if we're really getting knee deep into matchups and how players are going to match up with each other, OKC and the Clippers, those were tough matchups for the Celtics this year. And if the Mavericks were able to convincingly beat them, and the Minnesota Timberwolves for that matter, if the Mavericks were able to convincingly beat them, because none of those series went past 6. First series with the Clippers went 6 games. With OKC, I believe that went 6 games, and then this series with Minnesota went 5. So when you're not playing into Game 6, Game 7, that's where I tend to be a little bit more impressed, because it means you're not just taking care of business on the road, being able to steal one and take home court advantage, but you're able to go home and take care of business in front of your home crowd, and I think that's really important. So I know I kind of tailed off a little bit talking about Dallas. I'm just super excited for this series. I'm so excited. I might not look it right now, but trust me, inside my heart is just bursting. So anyways, I talked about Tatum. I think he should just continue to do what he's doing. The way he's approaching the game, from an IQ, maturation, and selfless standpoint, you can even look at him like a point guard. You know what I mean? I know it's crazy to think about, but Tatum's been handling the ball for a long time now, and he's not some small guy. He's a 6'8", 6'9" wing that can, get his shot over 95% of defenders at his position, take advantage of smaller guys. That's what I'd like to see. As a Celtics fan, that's what I'd like to see. Seeking the switch on guys like Kyrie, Luka. Go at Derrick Jones, go at PJ Washington, because they're playing with the utmost confidence right now, because they've seen all these scores in the previous 3 rounds. They saw guys like Shai Gilgeous, they saw guys like Paul George, they saw guys like James Harden, they just saw Anthony Edwards. They just dealt with Towns on the perimeter. So there's a lot of star scoring power that they have already seen to this point. So I think that's going to be really important, is Tatum's approach to the game. And I don't want to just sit here and say, be aggressive, shoot 25 times. No, just continue to do what you're doing, because what he's been doing, the guy is fresh off of averaging 30, 10, and 6 in a conference finals. I didn't look it up, and it's just hitting me now, but I should have looked up how many guys have averaged 30, 10, and 6 in a conference finals. Better yet, 30, 10, and 6 in a conference finals before they turn 27, because I believe he's 26 right now. But as much as I do love Tatum, and trust me, I do love Tatum, I still do think that the best player in the series is Luka Doncic. And that might not sound like a woke statement, but just because of his very early professional, basketball career taking off at, 13, 14, he's just seen so much. And I just feel like these American guys like Ant, Tatum, Booker, Halliburton, all these opposing USA guys that are around his age, John Morant, Trae Young, those guys, it takes experience to get to that point. You know what I mean? Like I said, he had a head start, so it's kind of hard to compare him in hindsight, in terms of seeing everything, the IQ. Luka's he's on another level. I just watched that game 5, and he had 20 points the first quarter. I think he had 36 for the game. Kyrie also added 36 too. I just feel like the way that man sees the floor. At first, I thought before this game, I thought his ceiling was Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. I thought that's where his ceiling, top 10, top 15 all time potentially. Now, when you see his resume, he just brought home Western Conference Finals MVP, first Finals appearance. I think he's made 5 straight first-team All-NBAs. By the way, he already has more first-team All-NBAs and Hall of Famers like Steph Curry. He has more than Russell Westbrook. I believe he has more than Dwayne Wade. Like the resume is starting to really like speak volumes now, and he is still the best player. It's a slight smidge, and I know Tatum. Everyone's gonna say Tatum plays defense. Tatum this. Luka has been showing us this postseason that he's very well capable of playing defense. You saw him on plenty of switches, contesting lobs. You know he's not afraid to go get rebounds. That goes into defense too, securing the possession. It's not a popular, defensive, niche, but you have to mention it. Defensive rebounding is a part of defense. You're boxing your man out. You're preventing them from securing another possession and potentially putting up another shot. So that does matter. One key that I think the Celtics are going to have to, figure out in this NBA Finals is obviously Kristaps Porzingis is expected to play in the NBA Finals. I'm not sure what game. I'm not sure what percent he's at. He's been out for a little bit over a month, if not a month exact. For those of you that remember Kevin Durant's calf strain in 2019, I forget at what point of the playoffs was he sidelined. I believe it must have been the first round. But anyways, he obviously we know he came back towards Achilles. So I'm trying to see, and obviously they're similar in height, obviously different play styles and careers, but their body type, the really tall, lanky, stretch forward, sort of say. Obviously Durant's not a stretch forward, but you're catching my drift. He is probably the biggest X factor for the Celtics just because he hasn't been playing, so you got to worry about in-game shape. It might take him a couple games to get back up to speed. And two, how healthy is his strain? It's already inevitable that game one, Luka Doncic is going to throw Kristaps in so many pick and rolls. We obviously know that Luka, the amount of pick and rolls he runs a game is insane. He's arguably the best pick and roll guy in the league right now from a scoring and playmaking standpoint. But we've seen Al Horford struggle, especially in that Pacers series against all those young guys. And I can't put too much on him. Like I've said prior, he has a lot of miles on him. I'm not sure what his playoff ceiling is. I mean, he's had some really, really good games thus far in the postseason, but particularly in drop coverages, pick and roll, I am a little bit worried about him, especially against the Kyrie and Luka. And I expect Luka and Kyrie to attack him as well, just like Kristaps. Those guys are gonna, they're not gonna shy away from them. You know what I mean? And ultimately, it's not gonna be that easy because we have the perimeter guards to, kind of keep them in front. But those picks, the picks are coming. The picks are definitely gonna be coming, and they're definitely gonna spam them. So I definitely want to keep an eye out on Porzingis's calf strain and where he is, and not just because of we miss his shots. I think the Celtics have done a great job of adapting their play style, especially with that particular dimension not being present this whole season. Like the Celtics without Porzingis have still been a really good team, but in the playoffs where things really slow down and the redundancies of ISO basketball, we've shown at times where we go back to bad habits. It hasn't been as glaring and as rapid as last year, but you see it here and there where not a lot of moving around, ISO, dribble, and that's where there's obviously going to be a percentage of that every game, but you just don't want that to dictate your offense in crunch time. If you're gonna live with a Jason Tatum, pull-up jumper, you just gotta live with it. But you don't want that dictating your offense throughout the game, sort of say, in order for your team to get in a rhythm. And the Celtics, with the likes of Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps, Al, those guys have been just great complementary guys around Jason and Jaylen. But I am worried about Horford and Porzingis in the pick and roll, their pick and roll defense, just because Al's a little older. Not sure where Kristaps's calf strain is this very second. Obviously within the next week, we'll get some more feedback about it. But yeah, that's one key. Second key, the Dallas Mavericks, and I mean, it kind of ties into Horford and Porzingis, what I mentioned before in the pick and roll defense. But Dallas just got back Maxi Kleber, I believe, game 4, even though they fell to the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. They got back Maxi Kleber. It's been a very, very underlying story. I'm not really sure why, because the way the Celtics want to play with, 5 out and Kristaps stretching the floor and whatnot, the Mavericks can duplicate a lot of that stuff with, Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber's not as tall as Porzingis, but he's a guy that can defend. He moves pretty well for a power forward. He can play some center, but the Celtics going small, that's something that the Mavericks can match, and I feel like that's a very vital point. And he's not one of the two primarily, twin towers. You have Gafford, you have Lively. Lively, who suffered a strain a couple games ago, took a tough collision. I think it was from Nas Reed. Yeah, I think he took a hand to the back of the neck. He was shaking up for a little bit. It was kind of scary because he had just ducked concussion protocol after game 4. And, there were some murmurs about, should he have, passed, concussion protocol or not. But I personally think that, he was great. He was great. He should have got more Rookie of the Year votes. When you have a rookie that can adapt and play his role, especially on a team that made the finals, I think that should have garnered a couple Rookie of the Year votes. I know I'm whispering, but really I'm yelling. Because listen, man, Chet Holmgren and Wemby, don't get me wrong, they're amazing players. As obviously, we already know about Wemby, and Chet was one of the best players on one of the best teams in the West. So those guys definitely earned all the respect that they got this year. But I really do feel like we really should have put a little bit more respect on Derek Lively. That's a guy that was bruising with Chet Holmgren in round 2. Round 1, he was bumping with Ivica Zubac, Plumlee. And then this past round, bumping with Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns as a rookie. That's a lot of notoriety in the front court. These are bigs that people know. Rudy Gobert just won a Defensive Player of the Year, and Lively was just banging with him for 5 games. That's pause. Sorry, but you get what I'm talking about. Derek Lively, I just feel like he really should have gone a couple more Rookie of the Year votes. And he lost his mother earlier this year. He has surprised me. He has really just blown me away. I do think that the Mavericks having 3 bigs that can play the 5 position, and you also can go and mention that, they could always go Maxi Gafford or Maxi Lively, or they could just go Kyrie, Luka, Dante Exum, PJ Washington, and Maxi Kleber. You know what I mean? I'm just thinking about hypothetical bench lineups. Because I really do feel like the Mavericks are kind of an underrated, deep team. Boston Celtics aren't that deep. I've been watching them all year. We're really not that deep. Tillman played, I don't know how many minutes he played in this series before. He wasn't that great. Cornette, Hauser weren't really that great in that Indiana series. Those were 2 guys that played, real minutes throughout the season. And this is what I'm talking about the playoffs. You got these rotations that may be deeper in the regular season, but these teams don't have 2 weeks to key in on your strengths and weaknesses. So now the game slows down. Now these guys are playing really, really important 12, 13 minutes. And, when things don't happen, you can't over-rely on the starting 5 to, put up 120 points and keep your opponent under 100. So you just want to be mindful of that. I do feel like that's where the Mavs have the advantage, because they can always go small with Maxi Kleber. I don't think there's any lineup in terms of front court versatility that Joe Mazzulla could go to that Jason Kidd can't match. From a personnel standpoint, I just don't think so. And I think mainly it's because of those 3 bigs, Lively, Gafford, and Maxi Kleber. And then you have the 2 wings, PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. Shout out Derrick Jones Jr. Actually, shout out both of them. You know what I mean? They've been great. It sounds like I'm a Mavs fan. Trust me, I get it. But you guys don't understand, obviously, I'm a Kyrie fan, but I wrote about the Mavericks. This was back in, I want to say February. I wrote about them. I didn't say that they were going to be title contenders, but I did alert people that, this is a real team. After the trade deadline, I was in love with the Mavericks, and I was like, man, this is a real team. And I was already watching plenty Mavericks games prior. like for those of you that follow Nass on Instagram, like top 5 teams I always talked about were like the Celtics, Suns, the Mavericks, the Clippers. Like obviously just because I got some of my guys on those teams, but yeah, I've watched a ton of Mavericks basketball, and I watched even more once they made those trades, and it really wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. Those guys just fit. They make sense. They play well together. So Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, 2 guys that weren't outstanding 3-point shooters prior to Dallas. And this kind of goes to the greatness of Luka Doncic, because he's going to put the ball in your shooter's pocket, and all of a sudden he's enhanced you as, a shot taker. So, actually this series, PJ Washington was off to a firing start from 3 to start the series. He very underwhelming in the Minnesota series. PJ shot like 22%. Not great, but the previous 2 series before, he was shooting at a high clip, like a real high clip. And he commanded respect. And that was one of my biggest keys in my article was like, listen, like if these guys can't command the respect of opposing defenders from 3, then I don't know how far I see Dallas going. But the sky's the limit if, they grow into be these 3-point shooters. And to be honest with you, I didn't think that was even going to happen. But, they've become respectable from 3. The Celtics are going to have to actually contest their shots in the corner because they're actually shooting with confidence. But yeah, those 2 wings, the reason why I mentioned those 2 wings is, all the talk has been about, Jaylen and Tatum, they'll guard, Luka-Kyrie, or, they have the 2 defenders, like they have a bunch of all 2-way guys. But I do really want to reiterate to people that like the Dallas Mavericks, like they're a really, really, really good defensive team. Really, really good. Like they're really, really good. They play together. They communicate. You can see it with your own eyes. Like you watch the games. It's not a fluke that they convincingly beat OKC and Minnesota. OKC and Minnesota were 2 of the best teams in the league. And then you take into account Denver, a team that Dallas beat on that Kyrie crazy buzzer beater. Maybe this was just supposed to be the year for Dallas. Who knows? Maybe this is just what it was supposed to be. And maybe that's what they've been trying to tell us, especially the last 2 months of the season. Because that's really when they got hot. Dallas, I think, was around like 7, 8, 9 seed. And then all of a sudden they kind of got hot that last like month. And, before I know it, they were a 5 seed. Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, for the most part, they're going to be assigned Tatum and Brown. And that's important because they're similar in size, stature, foot speed, agility. They're not as, Derrick Jones Jr. is a leaper. He's a fantastic leaper. PJ Washington has a little bit more muscle than given credit for. He's a little bit taller than initially stated, but I think those 2 are going to be the X factors for the Mavericks. If they can make lives harder for Jaylen and Jason, then this series is going to be a lot closer than people think. I think the series is going 7 regardless. I'm leaning Celtics in 7 just because, we're fresh off that finals in 2022. This is Kyrie and Luka's only 2nd year together. And I love the surplus of defensive guards and wings that we can throw at Kyrie and Luka. I think that's a luxury that not a lot of teams have. But on the flip side of it, when you think about it, they did go up against OKC. OKC had a bunch of guys that they could throw. They had Case and Wallace, who defended Kyrie just as good as you can for a rookie. Lou Dort, we already know what he was doing to Luka. Luka, I'm not going to lie to you, Luka did not play that great in the OKC series. I think that series was a little bit more telling about Kyrie Irving. I know Luka finished the series pretty well, but I think Kyrie's, and I talked about the chess with Tatum. Kyrie in that series, there was a couple games where he was, sub 15 points scored. But I am worried about the strength of the playoff teams that Boston faced. Only 2 losses to this point, which is beyond impressive. But they did have some moments against certain teams that kind of alarmed you. I mean, the Indiana series, you had Andrew Nembhard that was chopping up Al Horford in isolation a couple times. And that might have been a good test for them because it's a lot of pieces moving around and they can adjust and, do what they need to do. And that's a good test for, a potent offense like the Mavericks. But I still do worry that the Mavericks facing those 2, 3 prolific teams in OKC, the Clippers, the Timberwolves, like those were 3 of the best teams in the league this year. For those of you that really did follow the Western Conference, and someone like me, like all I did this year was watch the Celtics, and then I followed like 10 Western Conference teams. I just told you guys that after the Celtics, I was watching a bunch of Mavericks, a bunch of Clippers, bunch of Kings games. Obviously, Thunder, Timberwolves, they come on inevitably. The difference in strength of schedule, like that is going to be something that I'm going to take note of, because you got to think about it. Celtics, they face the Heat. Jimmy Butler. They got a couple games from Donovan Mitchell, then they missed him the rest of the series. Tyrese Halliburton hurt his hamstring, I believe, game 3? So you got to think about, are the Celtics ready for that? You know what I mean? It's one thing when you say you're ready for the matchup, but were you prepped for the matchup? Did you have a star scorer that you could really say, okay, well, this guy, we saw a guy that was just as dynamic? No, you haven't really faced that. So that's like my only worry for them. And I like I said, I do like Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington. I like their effort. I'm not sure if it'll matter because Tatum and Brown are already that good. But I do think that their effort and their athleticism, especially in transition in the open court, it's going to make Boston work a little bit more than I feel like people are initially thinking about. So that, and then my last point, the Mavericks won't win this series if Jaden Hardy and Dante Exum, if one of them, if not both of them, are effective. And when I say effective, I mean like during the non-Kyrie minutes, and we saw this in the Timberwolves series from Jaden Hardy. Jaden Hardy had some moments, you know what I mean, where he was keeping the ball alive, being dynamic, getting into the paint, and that's, at this point, that's kind of all you really want from a guy like that, because he hasn't really been playing since, post-trade deadline. He was a guy that was kind of shelved to the side and reserved minutes. He had some DNPs as the season progressed towards the end. So seeing him come into that Minnesota series with confidence, and he is a guy that is has utmost confidence. Shout out Rod too. He put me on a Jaden Hardy a while ago. He's a bucket. His strength is isolation scoring, but just another ball handler that's not going to be afraid of the moment. And I feel like Jaden Hardy, not a rookie. I believe he's a second-year player. He's not afraid of the moment, and you like seeing things like that. He had a little stretch in the Minnesota series towards the end, but I feel like it's a bigger deal than most. Dante Exum, I like Dante Exum because I feel like he's a guy that's gonna give effort to Drew and Derek White, but I feel like he picks up his dribble just a teeny bit too much. That's my thing with Exum, and he looks kind of panicky at times. But other than that, yeah, the real reason why I like the Celtics is, like I said, I like the ball stoppers that we have. I like the wings that we have. I think the most vital thing for the Celtics, besides approach and aggressiveness to the game, I think they're going to need to control the boards, and that's where Kristaps gets into play. And I'm just not sure where he is just yet. I have the Celtics winning in 7. Yeah, man, that's another episode of Nass the Pod. A hell of a series. I'm trying to think of something special to do for y'all throughout the NBA Finals. I think I'm just gonna drop something after every game. Really kind of take this thing up, because I appreciate all you guys. Supporting me and all that, and showing love and continuing to watch this. And I'm about to crash out when this season ends. Like, I'm really about to crash out. Like, this season's been so long. I've been putting in so much work into it. But I love it. You know what I mean? I really do love it. And I know I get corny and I say that all the time, but I really do care about this shit. So, man, appreciate y'all. Nass the Pod Season 3. Rocking more ice cream than Diggy Simmons.